I stand opposed to the motion that the House would like to implement a student loan system in Indonesia and to oppose the first proposition side ideas that coming from the video provided. First and foremost, one of the things that I caught on from the proposition speech is that it would like to implement a student loan similar to those in Singapore. I am quite surprised because we have to understand and know the economical situation of Indonesia and Singapore before we even think about implementing a loan system similar to them. Singapore is the country with one of the best wage median in the world, with very high employment rate and statistically speaking, a very predictable salary rate for new grads. To put it simply, especially since the proposition side brings up Indonesian middle class economy, Singaporean middle class and Indonesian middle class is very, very different. Singaporean middle class lives more comfortably than our middle class, which means they have more buying powers and they are not too vulnerable for sudden big expenses that, as mentioned by the proposition side, is one of the biggest reason middle class students drop out of university in Indonesia. And let's talk about wage, since our proposition side keep reassuring us that students only need to pay the loan once they have an income. Indonesian wage for new grads is very unpredictable and not as heavily formalized as those in Singapore. Let's talk about actual experiences in the market. UMR of Jakarta is 5 million rupiah in the minimum. But if you ever go to a job site and in general just search for jobs for new graduations, rarely any of them actually pays the new grads for 5 million. Most of them only pay for 4 million or most commonly 3.5 million. And I've been looking for work in job sites in the internet. I've been looking down for them, and I find it very rare to find job with that pays at least $4 million. And with that kind of wage, with that kind of inconsistencies for new grads, in my opinion, applying a student loan system is a very wishful thinking. I mean, out of so many students that takes a student loan, how many of them will even manage to secure an UMR wage? I'm willing to bet that it will be on the minority, not the majority. Not to mention the Indonesian work culture, especially for new grads, with the stressful parts of the job are instead thrown to the new grads, adding that to the fact that they need to pay a huge loan. Things will only make them very stressful. And loan will only make stressful workers, not skilled and successful workforce with this way. The proposition also mentioned the fact that student loan can produce skillful workers by making education accessible. But we gotta realize that Singaporean loan are there so the country can maintain a consistent amount of workers and workforce and not to crank up the amount of existing workers. If the main goal is to produce more workforce, a debt under the guise of accessibility is absolutely not the way. There are so many other programs that are able to upgrade our workforce quality, and student loans are not one of them. Also, the proposition side mentioned that student loan helps to fund university. To me, that sounds very shady. Because if you frame it that way, that university gains funds from loan repayment, that means students that take these programs are to be charged with interest. So on top of existing loan that they have to pay an extra for the interest with the entire loan with it. Let's look at how people pay their university here. Most people generally spend around tens to hundreds of millions of rupiah just for a bachelor degree alone. Now let's illustrate that you spend at least 100 million rupiah for your bachelor degrees, and that you take a student loan with it. On top of 100 million rupiah, there will be a light interest. And realistically speaking, how much of a light interest? Well, according to most banks, 10% interest rate is actually considered very light interest rate. So okay, let's apply 10% interest rate. So on top of 100 million rupiah you owe to the loan, you need to pay an extra 10 million with it. That is crazy. Let's say you secure a UMR wage that pays you like 5 million rupiah. Do you see what you're dealing with here? You have 110 million on debt, and you only have 5 million of wage monthly. That begs the question, how long does it take for you to pay the debt of your university? That is insane amount, even for a middle income family. It's like, it's like throwing the whole burden in the back. You're just backloading the whole financial burden of university. It's not solving the problem. Lastly, let's understand the concept of availability. The demand for the university in Indonesia is absolutely high and very constant. Universities only have limited seats, but by opening student loans, it provides everyone with availability. Here's the thing. Universities tries to give people availability by providing a somewhat accessible rate for them. Maybe like 1 million per 10 million for semester. You know what I'm saying? But with student loan, this removes the pressure for university to provide people with accessible rates, which means it's only going to inflate the price of the university payment. From 10 million per semester, you could be paying like 12 to 15 million per semester. Stack it up and add interest on top of it. Do you know this isn't solving the issues of accessibility for middle income people? And like I said before, we're just throwing the front-loaded burden of university UKT into elsewhere, into the future, and this didn't solve the problems that the proposition side trying to solve. That will be all from my opposition. Thank you.